Before the grand temples and statues, before the prayers and offerings, Bastet was merely a kitten, an ordinary creature, though all creatures hold their own magic, born under the glow of a blood moon in the quiet shadows of the Nile. In those ancient days and nights, long, long ago, Egypt was ruled by the old gods, their powers vast and formidable, shaping the world with their will. Bastet's story begins humbly, far from the splendor of thrones and temples. She was born in the hidden grasses by the river, her mother a simple temple cat who hunted small creatures in the night. Bastet was the smallest of her litter, a sleek black kitten with eyes as bright and twinkly as the stars above. From the moment she could open her eyes and feel the pulse of the world around her, there was something different about her. She was curious and fearless, exploring her surroundings with a boldness that belied her size. She would slip through the reeds and hide by the river's edge, watching the great crocodiles as they drifted lazily by. One time she even dared to ride on a crocodile's back for a while, or crouch in the shadows near the temple, listening to the priests chanting their invocations to the gods. Yet despite her brave heart, she was after all but a kitten. A fluffy, beautiful, cutesy kitten. The vastness of the world often overwhelmed her, the other creatures around her far larger, more dangerous. The hawks would circle above, their cries sharp, and the snakes with their little beady eyes slithered silently through the sands, always watching, always waiting for a moment of weakness. Bastet's mum was always nearby though, her keen senses attuned to the dangers of the wild. She had been through a lot to achieve her level of expertise in these matters. In her jaws she would carry little Bastet to safety, by the scruff of the neck, when danger approached, and the little black kitten would feel the warm comfort of her mother's presence, a reminder that even the smallest creature had protection if they were cared for, as every single creature should be. As the months passed, Bastet grew stronger and more cunning. She learned the ways of the hunt, how to move silently through the reeds and pounce with precision. But she also felt a pull, something deep within her, calling her toward the temple where the humans gathered. Her brothers and sisters stayed near the river, content with the life of wild cats, but Bastet would often venture close to the priests and their offerings, drawn to the scent of incense and the rhythmic hum of their voices. She enjoyed hearing chants, and would often get a buzz from this, going into a deep meditative state. It was on one typically beautiful night, under the silvery gaze of the full moon, that Bastet's destiny began to change. She had crept into the temple, silent as a shadow, and settled herself near the altar, where a young priestess was offering prayers to the gods. The priestess was not much more than a girl, and her hands trembled as she lit the sacred flame. Bastet watched her with keen eyes, sensing the girl's nervousness, the weight of the sacred duty that had been placed upon her. A sudden gust of wind blew through the temple, extinguishing the flame in an instant. The girl gasped, her eyes wide with fear, for the flame was meant to burn through the night as a symbol of the gods' presence. To lose it was an ill omen, a sign of their displeasure. Desperate, the girl fumbled to reignite the fire, but her hand shook too much, perhaps she had sweaty palms, and the flint slipped from her fingers. Bastet, moved by an instinct she could not fully understand, leapt onto the altar. The girl froze, her wide eyes meeting the gaze of the sleek black cat. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, without breaking eye contact, Bastet reached out with her paw, gently tipping the small bowl of sacred oil onto the unlit wick. As the oil touched the wick, it sparked back to life, and the flame was reborn. The priestess gasped in awe, her fear melting into wonder as she looked at the fluffy baby, now bathed in the warm glow of the sacred flame. It would have been a beautiful photograph, had cameras been invented then. She whispered a prayer of thanks, her voice trembling with gratitude, and from that moment on, she spoke of the divine cat who had saved her. Word of the miraculous cat spread through the temple, and soon through the city. Priests began to seek out the small black creature, offering her bowls of milk and pieces of fresh fish as tributes. Bastet, who had once roamed the reeds in obscurity, was now a favored presence within the temple. she would wander through the sacred halls with a quiet grace, her golden eyes watching over the offerings and the prayers, her presence a comfort to the priests and priestesses who now regarded her as a symbol of the divine. As Bastet grew, and grew she did, in more ways than one, for now as a goddess she had immortality, so too did her influence. The humans began to speak of her not as a mere cat, and most certainly not as a meerkat, but as something more, an embodiment of protection, a guardian of home and hearth. She was not like the other gods, with their thunderous power and fearsome wrath. No, Bastet's strength lay in her quiet watchfulness, her ability to protect the vulnerable, to soothe the anxious heart. Yet behind this peaceful mask, another force stirred, one that Young might have recognized as the shadow self, the darker counterpart lurking within. A shadow, long and fearsome, had always been at the edges of Bastet's consciousness. Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of war and destruction, loomed large in the pantheon. She was the fury of the sun, a force of nature that ravaged the enemies of Ra with her terrifying might. Where Bastet had grown to embody protection and nurturing, Sekhmet was wrath incarnate. And for all of Egypt's love of the nurturing cat goddess, they feared Sekhmet more deeply. For Bastet, Sekhmet was both an older sister and a distant mirror, a goddess of the same feline lineage, but a creature of a far more fearsome aspect. It was said that in the earliest days of creation, the two had been one, a single goddess with the dual nature of nurturing and destruction. But as the world grew more complex and the needs of Egypt's people became distinct, so too did their divine protectress split, each sister taking on a distinct role. Bastet, the protector and healer, and Sekhmet, the warrior and executioner. But the bond between them had never fully broken. Bastet could feel the pull of Sekhmet's rage deep within her own heart, a distant echo of the power that their people called upon in times of war. And, in moments of great crisis, when Egypt faced threats beyond the reach of diplomacy or protection, even Bastet herself had called on Sekhmet's fury. During a time of great unrest, when invaders threatened Egypt's borders, Ra called upon Sekhmet to unleash her wrath. Bastet, then still a growing force among the gods, stood in the shadow of her sister as Sekhmet's rage was unleashed. The devastation was terrible, crops burned, rivers turned red with blood, and the invaders were wiped from the land. But Sekhmet's fury did not end with the enemies of Egypt. Once awakened, her bloodlust was insatiable, and she began to turn on the people she had been sent to protect. Bastet, witnessing the carnage, knew she had to act. She could not match her sister's ferocity with force, such a battle would tear Egypt apart, but she could outwit her. With the help of Ra, Bastet devised a plan to calm Sekhmet's rage. They filled the Nile with red beer, making it look like blood, and when Sekhmet drank it, thinking it was the blood of her enemies, she became intoxicated and her fury subsided. The destruction ceased, and Sekhmet was brought back under control. From that moment on, Bastet's role as the protector became clearer. While Sekhmet would always be called upon in times of war, it was Bastet who held the balance, who soothed the wounds left in the wake of Sekhmet's destruction. She became the goddess who would heal, who would protect, and who would ensure that the fury of the gods did not consume their people. The two goddesses remained forever linked, their fates intertwined. Sekhmet, the lioness, the destroyer. Bastet, the cat, the protector. Together, they represented the full spectrum of divine power, destruction and creation, rage and protection, chaos and balance. Make a nice movie, yes? This story was nearly forgotten by time, tucked away in the ancient sands. But some stories never truly disappear, they linger in whispers, waiting for the right moment to resurface.